So welcome everybody to the podcast. We've finally got a name, The Wolf of Wallsend. There we go. And the special guest here today is 27 Seconds himself, Mr. Gerry Hill.
What's going on?
How are you doing today, Gerry? Is everything well?
Yeah, very good. Good to be out and about, visiting the wonderful city of Newcastle upon Tyne.
Yeah, good. Good memories. Rugby tour memories.
Can't talk about it.
Yeah, so lovely to have you here in the studio. First person in person to be here.
What a setup.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It's good. Yeah. Shout out to Lee Durham and Richard Lane for forking out on this kit right there. We'll get a... There we go, I like that. Getting all the value out of it. So look, we'll just jump straight into it. Yeah, I've explained the format to you. It's not too professional. You know, this is just sales banter, if you will. I guess the first question, or the first few questions, they're a little bit sort of, you know, your typical types of questions that you probably get asked in this sort of sales podcast or webinars, whatever you want to call them, different types of media, different formats. But how did you find yourself in sales? And to frame that question, did you fall into it like the rest of us?
I'd say it was about 80-20 fell, 20% deliberate. I think my context was a little bit different. I grew up, my dad was a professional seller in the 80s and 90s, working at sort of IBM and Xerox. Mm-hmm. So I'd kind of been around it a little bit. But when I went off to university, it definitely wasn't what I wanted to pursue. I had this grand vision that I was going to be an investment banker or something. Mm-hmm. And, you know, didn't really understand what it meant, but I liked the output of it a lot. And I messed around at uni in a way that most people don't, and, you know, missed out on the milk round a little bit. So who takes a chance on chances? Generally recruitment companies. So I ended up sort of falling into it that way. But actually, when I look back on sort of the definitions of selling, you know, investment banking selling, you're selling deals. Mm-hmm. Management consulting at McKinsey, you're selling deals. Mm-hmm. So virtually everything that's white collar or professional services today is some sort of B2B deal, origination or manufacturing. So the guys at McKinsey would hate to think of themselves that way, but they sell time. Right? So yeah, it's all good. And I became obsessed with it. I became obsessed with the psychology, the craft, the mechanisms, the unhidden signals, the hidden signals, and you know, just wanted to make it my life after that.
Yeah, you're big fan of the psychology behind it. Yeah, there's a lot to it, isn't it? We were in the last podcast with Darren Hill over at WeWork talking about Chris Voss. Yep. The FBI negotiator and the sort of psycho analysis behind sales and negotiation and all that good stuff. So yeah, that really does, I guess, ring true.
Yeah, it does. I mean, think about the root cause of what we do today in most selling. It's the skillful execution of the right words put together to inform or influence another human being. That's all psychology, so it's all science. Started in NLP, being reframed over time. Now you've got Chris Voss with tactical empathy. The concepts are the same though. You use power words to create an influence and ratchet up tension, and that's all it is.
Sales, Shakespeare's.
Yeah. Words matter.
Mm-hmm. So how did you find yourself at Connect and Sell? And that's not actually something I've ever asked you, so genuinely interested in that. So
I stepped away from being employed for a while, and I did advisory work and fractional sort of head of sales for pre-seed companies, generally out of my own Rolodex. But I kept bumping into the one problem, which is I just can't drive a conversation flow to collect enough data to determine whether these businesses have got value or scale attached, which is essentially what you're trying to do at pre-seed, you know. And I Googled, how do I get more conversations? It was as simple as that. And you get a whole bunch of stuff back, call center solutions and all the email orchestration stuff. Yeah. And then I just filled in a contact exchange thing on the website, which hasn't changed in the 6 to 7 years that I've known Chris Beale. And then one Saturday afternoon, I had this unknown number on my phone. It was +1605, so Denver, Colorado, in the United States of America. And I picked up the phone, and it was like this amazing, sort of very smooth, smart voice suddenly hit me. Oh, hi Gerry, it's Chris Beale with Connecting. So I saw that you wanted to have a conversation around XYZ. I was supposed to be out playing golf that afternoon, and I killed my round because the conversation I had with Chris Beale was possibly the most fascinating first call I'd ever had with a human being. And 2.5 hours later, he kind of said to me, why don't you do a test drive? And I was like, what's a test drive? And he said, oh, don't worry about what it is, just do it. And I became obsessed ever since. So, there was sort of 4 or 5 years of reselling and engaging my customers with Connect and Sell. And I had a primary use case when I was interim chief revenue officer at Ava. And then as that sort of value creation piece was coming to an end there, and my lifestyle was changing, I needed to be employed again because of marriage and kid scenarios and all this other stuff. So I needed more stability in order to deliver that. Chris was really proactive about having a conversation with me, saying, we want to stand up Europe. Are you interested in taking that on? So yeah, here I am, and sort of nearly 2 years into this journey. And it's possibly the most remarkable business I've ever worked in or around.
Have you had any better phone calls since then? Big whopping deals, or is that still the top one? It's the top call you've ever had come in?
It's the most amazing, complex conversation I've ever had with a complete stranger.
Yeah, that must be how my prospects feel every day. That's when they're not asking me to call back later because they're in a Teams or a Zoom call. Or, sorry, I'm in a Teams call at the moment. Oh, fuck. Right. So, what do you love then? I know you've answered a lot of those questions, right? And we'll get on to the nitty-gritty stuff after this. But what do you love about taking your Connect and Sell solution to market? I feel like I know some of the answers that you'll give. One of them is probably breaking down the maths to people and just dropping the mic and just blowing their head away with efficiency gains, productivity gains, revenue gains. I guess I'm putting words.
That's actually the boring stuff. Yeah, that's the boring stuff. Yeah. It's actually seeing somebody have this magical moment when the light bulb goes off in above their head, where they suddenly realise that actually this is about market dominance. It's not about doing something faster or better or cheaper. It's actually a new way to think about how you can go and dominate your market. And when you see people suddenly have that breakthrough, that's awesome, because you know that they've started a quest to not just transact business, but to actually go out and achieve something superior in a different way, and in white space. That's the thing. Like we're sort of coming back into this belief system that cold calls, conversations matter. Yeah. But for the past 8 years, we've been living in this sort of, think about it like this, running like a shed in treacle, driving engagement, whatever that means. And there's nothing more engaging than the human voice. Yep. So I think people are starting to see that again. And I'm positive for that. But no, it's the market dominance theory. Take your math of sales and figure out a way to make sure it's repeatable. And that's it. That's the message.
Breath of fresh air. Because, and look, I love the tech stack, right? And I've got friends, I've got clients, or at sales technology businesses, right? But as I sell a service to sales leaders, often I come up against a sales technology that promises to be able to do the prospecting, the negotiating, the closing, all within this SaaS subscription on a monthly basis. But not really. There needs that human touch at the very end, and a lot of tools that you see kind of sell the dream of we'll fill your pipeline with an email sequence. What's going to be the follow-up of that email sequence? What's the cadence? So it's breath of fresh air to hear, you've got a sales platform, you've got a sales technology, but you've got the human element to it as well, which, let's be honest, will keep us in a job in the next 5-10 years as AI will continue to do more.
Yeah, but we're not there yet. And, we're at a tipping point. And I think the companies that embrace technology to drive their go-to-markets will win in the medium term. Of course. But there's a lot of point pollution, and the sales tech stack's starting to feel like the marketing tech stack, which is now over 9,000 companies and growing. Yeah. Sales tech's probably about 2,000 companies and growing. None of them sort of position themselves beyond efficiency, though. And so the scope of ambition in how they message and drive the value then goes to, well, who do I like the best, and who's going to do the thing for me that I already believe works? Whereas actually, if you need to transform your go-to-market, which most sales leaders have to, right? Let's think about this. Average time in seat for a VP of sales in a high-tech company or high-growth company is 18 months.
Yeah, in and out.
In and out. You got 3 months, and you're out. So how do you manufacture change? It's not doing more of the same, right? But there aren't many sales technology companies that are that brave to go and tell that story that way. So we're a little bit Marmite in the market. Mm-hmm. Some people love us, some people hate us, some people think we're the best thing ever. Typically they win off us. The people that hate us are the people that hate having conversations.
Yeah.
And that's the tension. But that's the best part about my job is, it's kind of like come to Lazarus moments or finding disciples and separating disciples from atheists. I don't spend time persuading people into a belief system. Mm-hmm. I spend time working with people who've proven that they care about conversation flow. And the rest of the market, park it, go over there, do what you need to do.
Can't change the stripes.
Can't change the stripes, exactly.
Okay. Well, look, you've alluded a little to this next question, right? And again, a bit vanilla, so we'll get a bit more exciting after this, right? But you go to value builder. In what you do, what's your go-to value builder? And again, I think you've alluded to that a little, but when you may have someone, you've talked to me about that curiosity to interest to trust type, flow. What's your value builder there to take it to that trust in the art of possible type stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's consistency. Sales processes are built up of multiple types of conversations. There's the initial conversation, there's the discovery conversation, there's the commercial lock proposition conversation, there's the negotiation conversation. I think a lot of businesses today drive their sales processes with inconsistency, not consistency. You need something that glues all four of those conversations together across your sales process. So the value drive is pretty simple. You eliminate the fear, frustration and doubt that comes and accompanies cold calling. Typically that's because people don't have enough conversations to become good at it on one axis. The second axis is that people have a remarkable fear of the phone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you can increase the flow rate, examine why the fear exists, you can transform the fear immediately at a rate that you can't do if you just manually dial the phone today. So that's transformation at work. And when we get to discovery, we actually illuminate insight into how wasteful human resource is to do this critical part of the job. Typically we see a scale which suggests, right, I need to go out and execute on my value creation plan this year. What does that mean? I need to hire 150 reps. Good luck executing that plan this year on that hiring cycle. So how do I get the same amount of production value from my 15 best reps that I've already got in my business? Mm-hmm. And how do I determine their value by putting this to a consistent cost centre, not an inconsistent cost centre, which salespeople ultimately are. Mm-hmm. And I know there are going to be people here going, but big teams. Every single salesperson you hire at a certain point of funding and scale becomes less profitable to your business on net fee income per employee. So every net new hire comes with more cost attached, and that's just a frustration for boards, investors, CEOs, CFOs, and the salespeople themselves.
A lot of happy recruiters, though.
I don't want to talk about recruiters particularly. So there aren't many good ones.
So here's a bit of an impromptu question, right? The scenario for me, I guess I frame it a little bit, is my first sales role was pure shit, but it thrust me in the deep end and got me past the fear of the phone, right? And probably a little bit confident and maybe even when I was hitting KPI a little bit arrogant, right? Putting the commissions up on the board.
Swag's good.
Yeah, throwing up on the board your commissions, sat meeting, right, 50 quid, whoa, boom, tally that up. 200 calls a day, 2 hours talk time, but if you get your 2 meetings, piss off home.
Yeah.
Brilliant, right? The morale is excellent. When you were down, people would not have the bags packed at 5 without being asked. It was kind of like an untold rule that you would hang around, but it wasn't forced, it wasn't regimental, it wasn't like a regime, it was drive and ambition. I think like the right hires, which was good, right, good environment for me. So that's kind of where I've got a lot of my tenacity from, and picking up the phone and being in conversation first, right? prospects probably see 07 930 211 226 coming in and think, right, here we go. Here's the Geordie coming. but have you got a scenario maybe where it's slightly different from your experience, where there's someone who has been, whether you want to call it shy, afraid of the phone, not confident in their ability on the phone, and whether you've empowered them with Connect and Sell or not, they've completely changed the feathers, and they've changed their stripes, and now they're becoming the best conversation first salesperson they could.
And actually I like working with introverts more than extroverts, because extroverts have always got an opinion on how to do it well, and they've always got a theory that, to use the title of this podcast, Wolf of Wall Street, everyone's got this perception that Jordan Belfort is a master. Jordan Belfort got more no's than anyone.
Yeah.
Right? So when you start breaking down the function of a cold call, what are you trying to do? Well, you've got to solve a problem. I'm the problem. The business problem isn't the problem right now. I'm the problem. So I need to figure that out. So I need to create a way to create tension and permission so that I can continue the conversation. I then need to move that person from a fear state to a trust state quite quickly. And then I have to earn the right to ask for the business. When you break down the component parts of the anatomy of that cold call, doesn't matter what system you use, by the way, but there's 4 critical parts to a cold call. It's kind of like coaching football, rugby, tennis. If somebody's going through a crisis of confidence, it's because they're trying to consume the whole skill without mastering the bits. So in rugby coaching, we call it whole part whole. Right? You do the skill, you analyse where it breaks down, you then coach the part, the next part, and you bring it back together. And you can do that virtually for any skill set in the world, with anybody, providing they're cognitively capable. So let's think back to the experiment our good friend Kev over at Refracted with his son. He taught his kid how to do cold calls, had no limiting records. And that's the big part of the psychology that most reps suffer from today, is they've got these belief systems that they learn through the walls of their companies. Common one would be, we can't make calls on Friday afternoon because everyone's at the pub or left early. We can't call on Monday. We can't call here. We can't call on Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday. Everyone's left early, to quote my good friend Ryan Rezard. So when you have these belief systems, of course you can't do anything. And then if you don't have a skill architecture to drive a system that's repeatable and consistent, then you're never going to get up and do the work. And then you're going to miss quota and you're going to blame it on something or somebody, but not take full responsibility for yourself either. So, it's a virtuous circle.
Bit of stoicism in there with belief systems. That's where I've heard that.
Rivers of shit. Everything's rivers of shit. Make the best of it.
The best example of that, and you use a sport analogy, I will as well. I've spent the last 4 or more years kickboxing, trying to perfect the twist of my... People are listening to that thing. What the hell's he talking about, right? But trying to perfect my hip flexor, turning over into a kick.
Yep.
So I'm kicking with my shin horizontal instead of vertical. So basically, if I kick someone in the elbow, if it's going vertically up, I'm going to smash all them nice little bones in my feet. I'm going to be in a lot of pain. Or if I can turn it into the shin bone, go straight in under the arm, jobs are good in, right? But I've spent 4 years with ballerina, mobility stretching exercises and all this type of shit, right? Fiona, my fiancée, will walk in. I'll be strung up like a gimp with my legs up in the air, hanging on this little cable pulley system that I've got for stretching, right? But the serious analogy is, you can bring in a kid off the street with no limiting beliefs or no idea of how the body mechanics should work, and they'll get it within 10 minutes.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, a few weeks later, they're doing, jumping butterfly kicks, and you're stood there trying to master the basics, and it's just that.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a critical component where talent's attached.
Yeah.
Right? Talent's attached. I think one of the big issues that we see in society, which means that humans don't lend themselves to being particularly effective sellers, are easy to understand, right? As a kid, what are you taught? You're taught to be polite. You're taught not to interrupt. You're taught to get along. You're taught to learn system and rote. You're not taught to think for yourself particularly. So when you suddenly hit the real world and you realise that the skills that actually matter are the ability to challenge, to interrogate, to interrupt, to tell stories, that leaves 98% of the population having to relearn these new skills that ultimately are the skills which drive commercial excellence. So, of course, call reluctance exists. Of course, that sort of plateauing effect exists. And, you know, broadly speaking, like somebody said to me at a dinner party a few weeks ago, if you could be like minister of anything in the government, what would you be? I said, Minister of Education.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one thing that you can really change a generation for the better against. And so what does that mean? I'd teach people how to use Excel, not maths. I'd teach them how to use Excel. I'd teach them how to talk about like P&L. I'd teach them how to tell stories. I'd teach them how to ask probing questions. I'd teach them how to be curious. And I think with those 5 key elements, the most consistent, successful salespeople of any stripe that I see do those 5 things better than anyone else.
Brilliant. Moving swiftly on. Now, this is a question that you might have to pussyfoot around a little bit, because I know that you're quite a man around town when it comes to this stuff, right? But your top few tools of the trade, and I think I know what number 1 is, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's inevitable. It's connect and sell. You need an operating core. I like Salesforce because it's the most interoperable of the cores available. I use Mixmax because I don't do like heavy sequencing where I need to send 500 emails. I do all my prospecting emails behind conversations. So that just organises really well for me. Allows me to manage my meetings and my templates and everything really well. And it's cheap. It's like only 60 quid a month, so I can run that myself. And then for my deal management, I use DealPoint, which is a mutual action plan piece, which aligns to Salesforce and moves everything around. Yeah. But with my customer driving that as much as me. And that's about it. Hardware is more important to me than software now. Right. I want durable, proper hardware that works. Yeah. Doesn't break.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Shout out to Tom Williams.
Love that guy.
Over at DealPoint.
He sent my 7-month-old son's favourite toy. Is a toy that Tom Williams sent me. It's called Tom.
He's a good guy, like.
He's an amazing human.
He's a good guy. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, I think, not to take it away from you, but I think, again, for me, I can't remember exactly what I was...
And Refract. Big shout out to those
Refract,
guys. Yeah, definitely. Can live without it.
I learned a lot from Richard Smith when I first joined Durham Lane, cold calling wise. Just say, for instance, as I do from you, it's you know, Problem Prospecting is the first book that I tell anyone to read when I joined Durham Lane.
Perfect.
So yours is some money, basically, is what I'm saying now. You've got at least 10 sales off the back of me, not to mention the introductions. Yeah. Anyway, right, so yeah, Lusher's a key one for me. Connect and Sell is riding its way to the top of that list. And I always have to shout out sales staff. I've had sales staff since the day I joined a sales role, and it's probably cost businesses I've worked for a fortune, right? But hopefully it's paid for itself. Yeah. So this is my favourite question, right? And this is kind of the last question. We'll wrap up on this one, a little bit lighthearted. Your favourite sales media, right? I'm talking films, I'm talking books. I know you've shouted out a couple a day, podcasts. And to set the scene for my film, Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah, okay.
Brilliant film. I like The Brutal Truth, right? And again, repeat myself on the last podcast, don't know if that's good etiquette on this or not, but Pursuit of Happiness, the scene where he gets the list of people that cold call and whips his way straight to the top. That's it for me.
Yeah.
That's
so
the top cream of the crop.
I'm not going to say obvious ones. So my favourite sales book, which I'm definitely going to put in the hands of my child when he can read, because it's child friendly, is Who Moved My Cheese. It's probably the greatest story about how to manage change, which is the human condition. I mean, it's phenomenal. But it's not a sales book, but it applies so wonderfully to the craft and the art of selling. Film, I'm going to blow your mind here.
Go on then.
What Woman Want, with Mel Gibson.
Okay.
Because it forces people to radically rethink about a different perspective. Right? I'd love that superpower for a range of reasons, but in a professional selling context, everyone's superpower would be to imagine what somebody's actually thinking and be able to react to that.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the ultimate selling narrative, is how far do you go in your customer's shoes? It doesn't matter what you sell. If you can do that, you can win.
Yep.
So I love that film for teaching that lesson. Plus advertising's badass. I mean, they're big deals. So you know, it's really good. Of the more typical sales films, I just like old school Vin Diesel in Boiler Room. You know, just the swagger, the obsession. The obsession in that community was amazing. And then, Glengarry's all right. I think it's still got a relevant story to tell, but I just think it's aged now.
Yeah.
It's aging a bit. I hope nobody ever remakes it, though. And then Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. Like, it's heavy work, it's a play, it's hard to read without other people sort of acting it out, but it actually shows how shitty a career it can be if you don't work at your craft.
Yeah.
As well. So, yeah, I mean, those would be my top few.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, look, good way to wrap up on that.
Thank you for having me.
Check them out. I need to watch that film, What Women Want. I can't say I've watched it, but maybe it's something I can
it's a shitty rom-com with Mel Gibson and Helen Hunt. And he wakes up one night, the next morning after a hangover, and he's able to read the thoughts of females. And he's like this really misogynistic advertising executive who can pretty much only do like beer and sports commercials.
Okay.
That's his niche. And Nike come to the agency with this campaign to empower women. Right, so Nike clearly funded the film, and Helen Hunt's his like competing executive, and they're both trying to win the bid internally. But because he can get in her head, he's producing her ideas faster than she is. But that's not the parable. The parable is get inside your prospect's mindset.
Yeah. I'm going to check that out. I'll let you know what I think. But again, lovely to have you.
Thank you.
Brilliant for being up here. Brilliant to have you here in person as
Thank
well,
you.
up in Newcastle. I thought you'd go and check out Timemouth, but you've already been, so there's not much more else to see. Unless you want to go to the big market or something tomorrow night and see some pink tutors strutting around. But yeah, good stuff. Brilliant. Thanks everyone. Tune in next week or whenever I'm going to do the next one, and have a lovely day. Thank you very much.